Hi everyone, this is Mindy for Honeybee Stamps, and in today's video I'm going to be creating this beautiful floral bouquet using the Daisy Layers stamp set, Daisy Layers bouquet stamp set and coordinating stencil. So here is a look at that stamp set. It's a large 6x8 stamp set, and I'm going to be using that image down in the bottom right hand corner. Now there's also some coordinating stencils here, and they do list at the top, it's etched into the stencil, what layer it is. Now the first thing I like to do when I'm doing some layering with an image like this is stamp it out in a light color of ink first. This happens to be a light gray ink from Altenew, but you can use distress inks or any other type of ink that you have. I just like starting with a light gray. I'm going to leave my stamp in place in my Misti and then put some repositionable tape on the back of my stamped image. I'm placing this on my magnetic station and I'm lining up the first layer of the stencil. Now, my inspiration for this came from the Honeybee Stamps website. They have kind of a general idea there of how everything is to lay out, and I really liked their colors, so that is what I'm trying to replicate today. I started the first layer of the stencil with Squeezed Lemonade Distress Ink. So that you can see is a nice bright yellow. And then I wanted to give the second layer of this particular flower with Fossilized Amber. Now, when I did this, it ends up being just a little bit too dark of a yellow. It didn't seem to really match that bright yellow that I had. So I'm going to bring the first layer back in and add just a little bit of that fossilized amber, just kind of leaving the outside edges of the flower, that bright yellow, to give it a look of dimension. So I liked this a lot better, so now I'm going to move on to stencil 3, which is going to be filling in all the rest of the daisies. And I'm starting out with a really light blue. Now this happens to be, Tumbled Glass Distress Ink. And I'm applying this really light-handed. I didn't want this to be a very bright blue, and I didn't want it to be a heavy layer of blue. So I just kind of did a light hand, not applying a lot of pressure. And then I'm going to bring in the next layer of the stencil to fill in some more of those flower petals. Once again, I'm sticking with the tumbled glass. Now, I really do stay with the tumbled glass for most of this. If I wanted to get a darker color, I could have gone in a little bit more heavy-handed and applied a little bit more pressure. But I just left it all kind of that light blue. And then I'm moving on to the last layer of the stencil, and for this is all the greenery. And I had thought about doing this in 2 different shades of green, but I started out first with Twisted Citron. That's kind of my base layer. I have it darker towards the flowers and then got a little more light-handed towards the leaves. Got a little more light-handed towards the outer edges of the leaves. Now I'm coming in with Peeled Paint. And I was really liking how this was layering on top of Twisted Citron. So this is where I decided to just leave it and not have 2 different shades of green. But this particular layer does have the middles for the yellow flowers. So I brought in a walnut stain for that. Now at this point, everything except those blue flowers was pretty vibrant. So I came back in with Broken China just over one of the layers. I don't even remember which layer this was, but just one of the layers, and added some of that darker color to it. Now I brought this back over to my Misti since my stamp set is still there, and I'm going to ink that flower back up with intense black ink. Now, to be honest, I wasn't sure if I was liking those 2 different shades of blue, but once I stamped the outline back in that black ink, I really liked how this was coming together. So to make sure I have some really good lines and good coverage, I am going to ink it up one more time in that intense black ink, making sure to really get those outer edges of the leaves. Now, since I had my Misti out and my black ink, I decided to go ahead and stamp a sentiment, which also comes off of this Daisy Layers Bouquet stamp set, and I'm just going to stamp it onto some white cardstock with my intense black ink. Now, there are coordinating dies for the sentiments and all the images, so I lined up the coordinating die for the sentiment, just kind of held it down with my Easy C tape and ran that through my die cut machine, and I also die cut a few other ones from some scratch cardstock and layered that together with my liquid glue to build up the dimension. For the front panel of my card, I'm going to use this kind of cream striped paper from the Pinstripes and Polka Dots Spring Paper Pack. So I trimmed that down to 4¼ by 5½, and I'm adding that to the front of my white card base that is also 4¼ by 5½. Now I'm using a rectangle die to die cut out my image. Now I could have used the coordinating die, but I really wanted to have that white space around my bouquet. So I have my rectangle piece here that's about 3¾ by 5 inches, and I layered that with some foam tape to make that pop off of the card base a little bit. Then I can add my sentiment to the center there with my liquid glue. Now for embellishments, which I just had to do, I was struggling between these two. I really like those light blue pearls, but I also really liked these kind of sparkly ones. This is the Aurora Borealis. It takes me a second to say that. So I used these. Now these are already self-adhesive on the back. So I picked them up with my craft pick and I put 2 towards the bottom and 3 towards the top. I think the blue pearls would have looked just as gorgeous. And that finishes up my card project for you today. So I hope you enjoyed today's inspiration. And if you have any paper packs in your stash, think about using them as your background to your card projects. I really like how that turned out with the stripes and kind of having that cream color in the background. Thanks so much for joining me today, and see you again soon.